The market doesn't know what keeps you up at night. It doesn't know when you want to retire, and it doesn't know how old you are. The simple truth is, the market doesn't care. But if you care, you've tuned into the right place. You're listening to Investor Resources, bringing clarity to the confusing world of finance. Here are your hosts of Investor Resources, Don Creech and Perry Sykes.
I'm Don Creech.
And I'm Perry Sykes, and welcome to the Investor Resources Podcast.
So one of the pieces of big news is that Adam Jonas at Morgan Stanley has issued an apology to Mr. Toyoda with a D at
Correct.
Toyota with a T, because Morgan Stanley was wrong. Hybrids are the winning proposition for environmental care, and they work better. Toyota knows how to do math. You'd think Morgan Stanley did, but apparently they don't have enough experience in the car business.
Apparently that's the case. And, you know, you hear that from us all the time. Ignore the narrative, follow the data. And Toyota, to their credit, said, look, we did the math on this. Not only are hybrids better for the environment, you can't build all these electric vehicles you want to build. There simply aren't enough resources to build all the batteries alone for it, let alone everything else you need, all the steel. It just can't be done. And everyone on earth said, Toyota, you're crazy. This is what's going to happen. This is what the consumer wants. It's what governments want. It's what's going to happen. You guys are on the wrong side of this. And Toyota went back and said, well, let's check again. And they did. And they said, no. This can't work like this. There's just not a chance this can happen. And it took until all these manufacturers literally hit the wall and realized, not only can we not get the batteries, we can't produce the batteries. And if we did, we can't sell the vehicles. And that's when it was like, oh, wait a minute, maybe Toyota wasn't so far off. And it's not a matter of being so far off. They were spot on. They could not be moved off a dime. They said, this is the truth about what's going on here. And it doesn't matter how many people say, no, it's all electric. It can't happen yet. We'd be glad to go that way, just not now. It's not going to work. And turns out they were 100% correct. It's amazing.
Well, the government kind of messed up like they did with COVID. They said, this is what needs to be done. The people are going to do this. And to be sure they do it, we're going to make it financially attractive to have them change their mind and change their way of life. And once reality set in, that said, wait a minute here, I don't really want to do this because it doesn't work for me. It works in Europe because the travel distances are very short. However, cold weather does disrupt the efficiency quite a bit.
That doesn't work either. Yeah.
And it works in China because of the development of the compact cities and the high rises. They've concentrated population. But in the United States, while we do have some concentrations of population in our major cities on the coast, and then there's Chicago in the middle of the country, actually getting across the country in an electric vehicle requires a great deal of strategy and extra time. So it didn't take too long for adoption to figure out that this wasn't really attractive. Right. So EV sales have really collapsed. And it's facing some additional problems. So we've kind of touched on these in some other podcasts that we've done. But BYD in China is the number one manufacturer and sales of electric vehicles, all electric vehicles, replacing Tesla, which is now number two. And in order to compete, Tesla has had to cut prices numerous times. And those price cuts have come into the United States, dropping the competitive price level for Ford and GM and Stellantis. And they're saying, oh, wait a minute, even with government subsidies coming directly to the company and going to the consumer, this isn't going to work. Hybrids make sense. Toyota was right. It's basically doing the numbers, paying attention to what's going on, and getting on board the working process. And even taking some criticism or scandalous scurrious comments about your wisdom when
Yep.
you're right, you're willing to take that verbal abuse, political abuse, if need be, and that's exactly what Toyota has done. And the net result is their hybrid sales this last year were up 1 million units from the year before, and they think they're
Right.
going to be up again this year, and their profits are rising. I mean, my goodness, for guys who stuck to their guns, it's paying off big time. Where you
Yep.
look at Ford and GM and Stellantis trying to take advantage of government subsidy and succumbing to government pressure to build something that made no economic sense for them. And
And that became the
Ford is,
truth. Yep, that
yeah,
became the truth of what was going on. The economics didn't make any sense for in the industry. They're called the BEVs, the battery electric vehicles, without the ICE, the internal combustion engine added on. And Toyota just looked at the infrastructure, like you were talking about, Don, just being able to go drive around freely. You can't do that with an electric vehicle yet. You have to map out where the next charging station is, and you have to be lucky enough that when you get there, it's still functioning, because there's lots of those that are not working anymore either. And so that hybrid is just way more flexible in where you can go. And so it became a desirable vehicle to own. And while interest in the BEV, the battery electric vehicle, is still growing, it's nowhere close to the demand for the hybrid. And Toyota just looked at the numbers and said, look, folks, what you're trying to do here, number one, can't really be done. And number two, people don't want it. They don't, as much as you think that's where the market's going, it's not. The real market's still in hybrids. And the rest of the world together said, well, hybrids are going to be just a short lived bridge between fossil fuel powered vehicles and all electric vehicles. And they're going to be eliminated as quickly as possible. Turns out not true at all. They're going to be around probably quite a long time, because the infrastructure to let you use an electric car just doesn't exist yet. So even if you have one, there's nowhere to use one. And like I said, it wasn't until they ran into the reality of especially the battery issue. We can't produce enough batteries. And all of the first round of all electric cars are coming up on time to replace the batteries now, and that has just become a major sticker shock. There was a person online saying that they spent $17,000 buying their new all electric vehicle, and now they have to get the batteries replaced. It's a little over 20,000 to get the battery replaced. And they're like, we bought the whole car for less than that. How does this work? And it's like, yeah, the math works nowhere. Nowhere. Doesn't work new, doesn't work used, doesn't work anywhere. So the all electric vehicle is just not quite ready for prime time with the current technology available, and both on the charging infrastructure side and the battery production and replacement side. And so it's just going to be a while. And in the meantime, those hybrids are saving fuel, helping the environment run cleaner, and actually getting in people's hands in enough numbers to make a difference. So Toyota saw that. They stuck to their guns, and they're getting paid for it. Now, you don't see that a lot these days. Everybody rolls over, and I think, and succumbs to whatever the headline is these days. And Toyota's just said, that's not the case. This can't be true. You guys are going to run into trouble. And sure enough, they did. It's tough to argue against what is true.
well, there are some environmental factors that help push the public perception around. One, there's been more news about the EV batteries catching fire,
Oh,
spontaneous
sure.
fire, if you will. And once those
Yep.
things get started, I mean, you just lost your car because they can't put them out. The fire
No.
is going to burn until it's done with fuel. The other
Yep.
issue has been the weather hasn't been particularly helpful this year. We have had a very cold winter, and particularly in Canada, where people have just basically taken their EVs back to the lot, traded it in, bought something
Right.
else.
It
We
won't go. Yeah.
in one of our emails that we did earlier or late last year had a picture of Canadian car lot, and he said can't sell these things because they won't run. Basically, it's so cold here. And we have the stories that hit with the electric school buses that were funded by
Same.
government special grants. They
Same
can't
thing.
make the run to pick the kids up because the batteries won't last long enough to make a simple school run. So those have hit the news, and that's helped change the attitude of consumers about whether or not they really want to go buy one because there's a tax advantage attached to it. You should
Right.
never do anything because there's a tax advantage to it. You should do something because it makes sense. And if the tax advantage comes along, that's an extra. But the tax advantage investment is usually not the best choice of, as an alternative. So,
No, not if that's all that's driving it. And that's what they found out. They did all these consumer surveys, and people are saying, yeah, I would love to buy an all electric car, but that's only if the conditions would allow me to drive it as I want to or need to. And that's not where we are yet. And they figured they were looking at, 18 months, 2 years, and we were going to be converted over to all electric vehicles. That was kind of the thought process of what was coming up. And now they're looking at it saying that hybrids are going to play a role for years to come because we're much farther away from all electric possibility than we ever thought before. Well, at least that we would admit to, other than saying that's a really good idea, let's do it. And they're still working on that full speed. Not going to happen anywhere near the time frame that they thought it was. So a little bit longer going on, and that hybrid, which still has that fossil fuel powered engine in there, burning gasoline, allows you to continue your journey wherever you're going, even if that battery is dead. So while you can get the recharges, it helps everything run better. And then if you can't, you can just keep on going. That's why they're selling more. That's why it's working. And the math works on those. They're selling more because they're not quite as expensive, and they're nowhere near as expensive, of course, when it comes time to replace the batteries, because there's nowhere near as many in the hybrids.
well, and the hybrid doesn't have a requirement for the heavier body structure. So the
Right.
EV requires a lot more steel. Steel requires coal plants. Oh, nasty, nasty coal plants required in order to make just the framework of them. And then the heavier car, and then the heavier frames because of the bigger battery. And that
Right.
requires heavier, more expensive tires, which tear up asphalt at a higher rate than the current vehicles do. So
Oops.
it was supposed to be environmentally friendly when it's environmentally destructive to get to your green energy. The other two winners besides Toyota are from South Korea. That's Kia and Hyundai. Both of those are major manufacturers and importers of hybrids.
Hybrids.
Ford and
Yeah.
GM had hybrid plans. They basically stopped those. They're reactivating the plans to build hybrids because they need to be in the market to compete,
Sure.
while they shut down production of the electric vehicles. And that shutdown of electric vehicle production is going to sit well with the United Auto Workers because they actually had one of their unions, one of the offspring of the UAW, came out against President Biden in this election, and the
How
reason
about
was
that?
he's shipping our jobs to China. I mean,
Right.
if we go forward with EV plant production, we will have no jobs here. And they said, we don't like this policy. Well, which is no
Well,
surprise. My goodness.
right. Not to mention it just can't, it's not going to be met as it is envisioned today, because the EVs just can't do it. And Europe's having the same problems. They said that, fleet fuel requirements levels in the European Union essentially can't be met without heavy use of electric vehicles. Those aren't going to be there now. And it's easy to see, as they put it, you don't have to have a Nobel Prize in math to understand that we need lots of electric vehicles to meet the fuel standards in the European Union. Not going to happen. Those are going to have to be altered because there's not going to be that many electric vehicles as previously envisioned, because there can't be. And so the reality, rears its ugly head again, and they're going to have to make an adjustment.
The chief executive, Stellantis, told the Financial Times that they will still sell battery electric vehicles to, in his words, the green addicts, but that they're going to have to convert back to hybrids in order to stay in business.
There you
But I
go.
haven't heard anything about what Volkswagen's going to do, because Volkswagen last year or the year before made a commitment that by this year they would be 100% battery electric vehicles.
Yep.
And if the numbers don't work, how can they keep doing that? Yeah, that
They're
just doesn't
gonna
make a lot of sense.
they're gonna have an updated process. You can believe me. So
Well, I think that we kind of ran out of related material there, unless we run off into solar and stuff, and that wasn't really the subject for for this podcast.
we covered it.
Yeah, okay, we'll call that a wrap, and we'll look forward to our next session. If you haven't subscribed, do so down below. We'll keep you updated when we post new material. You can also watch our webinars. You go to our website. The link is on the website. Information's on this next screen. And we just posted a new stock market update for the beginning of March.